Deadly in-laws tried to kill me to replace with a more profitable match for their son. Hello everyone, I'm Ava. It's been a while since I've shared anything personal online, but what I've been through recently makes me think that maybe my story could be a cautionary tale, or at least a discussion starter about how far family politics can go. This isn't easy for me, and honestly, it still feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Just over a year ago, I married the love of my life, Connor. He is everything I ever wanted: kind, attentive, and incredibly supportive. I thought I had hit the jackpot, not only in finding him, but supposedly in gaining a new family. Connor comes from a very well-to-do family, influential in business circles, and pillars of our local community. At first, I was enchanted by their charm and warmth in public, but I soon realized that behind closed doors, things were very different. My in-laws, Diane, Richard, and Sophie, Connor's mother, father, and younger sister, never really accepted me. From day one, I felt like an outsider trying to penetrate an impenetrable fortress. The polite smiles were there, the courteous nods, but the warmth was absent. There were no open arms. It was as if they had a family script that I wasn't privy to. I chalked it up to them being protective of Connor, their golden boy, or maybe they were just inherently reserved people. But deep down, I always felt there was more to it, a sort of cold calculation behind their distant politeness. Living close to them, as tradition dictated, didn't help. We attended Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, and other seemingly endless family events, where I played the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, all the while feeling the undercurrents of their subtle, yet constant, disapproval. Connor, bless his heart, seemed oblivious to their coldness, always brushing it off as them being old-fashioned or set in their ways. Things took a drastic turn on my 25th birthday, a day that should have been filled with joy and celebration. Diane insisted on throwing me a party at their estate, a grand affair by any standard. It was unexpected, given their usual treatment of me, but I was touched by the gesture and thought perhaps it was a turning point in our relationship. Little did I know, it was a setup that would lead to the most terrifying night of my life. As I look back now, I realize how naive I was to think I could ever be a part of their world. That night was the beginning of a series of calculated attempts that showed just how far they were willing to go to remove me from their family, and from Connor. This is the story of how my in-laws tried to kill me, not out of hate, but out of a desire to replace me with someone they deemed a more suitable match for their precious son. The journey through these chilling events has been harrowing, eye-opening, and life-altering. Turning 25 felt like it should have been a milestone, a day to celebrate, especially since Diane, my usually distant mother-in-law, had offered to throw me a birthday bash. The gesture was unexpected, almost suspiciously kind, but Connor was excited about it, and I didn't want to dampen his spirit by refusing. "She's trying, Ava," he reassured me, his eyes full of hope that this might bridge the gap between me and his family. Despite my reservations, I agreed, not wanting to be the reason for any familial strife. The day of the party, the estate was immaculately decorated, the gardens adorned with lights and flowers, the tables laden with an array of exquisite dishes. It felt like a scene out of a fairy tale, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. As guests started to arrive, the air filled with laughter and music, and Diane played the gracious hostess to perfection. Halfway through the evening, she announced it was time for the cake, a beautiful, towering creation that looked too good to be true. As she brought it over to me with a wide, almost triumphant smile, I remember thinking how thoughtful it was. But as soon as I took a bite, my mouth started to tingle ominously. My throat began to tighten almost immediately, a reaction I was all too familiar with. Panic set in as I realized the cake must have contained nuts. Connor noticed my distress instantly. His reaction was swift as he rummaged through my purse, pulling out my medicines and administering it without hesitation. The room blurred around me as I fought to breathe, the faces of family and guests etched with various expressions of shock and concern. Thanks to Connor, the reaction was curbed just in time, but the night was ruined. While Diane feigned ignorance and distress, claiming she had no idea about the nuts, suspicion gnawed at me. How could she not know when Connor had made my allergy clear to everyone in the family? A few weeks later, another family gathering at the estate presented what seemed like a chance to move past the birthday incident. Sophie, Connor's sister, suggested a swimming competition during the party, a seemingly innocent enough activity. Eager to fit in and make up for the last disrupted gathering, I agreed, even though competitive sports were more her thing than mine. The game started playfully, with splashes and laughter, but soon Sophie's demeanor shifted. Her pushes became more forceful, her tactics more aggressive. Each time I came up for air, it seemed harder to do so, her hand pushing me back under the surface, her laugh no longer friendly, but chilling. "Come on, Ava, don't be such a spoil sport," she taunted, as I gasped for air, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't fun anymore. It was a struggle, a genuine fight to stay afloat. The fun and games on the surface masked what felt like a darker intent beneath. When I finally managed to wrench myself away, coughing and panting, the look in Sophie's eyes was not one of concern, but of cold calculation. The day ended with me shaken, increasingly convinced that these were not mere accidents. Both instances were too calculated, too coincidental to be innocent mistakes. These were warnings, sinister signals that I was not welcome, pushing me to a realization that my place in this family was more precarious than I had ever imagined. Connor and I returned to his parents' house late that evening, exhausted but hopeful for a quiet end to an unsettling day. As we entered our bedroom, everything appeared normal at first glance. The room was just as we had left it, orderly and serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had been brewing within me. However, the peace was short-lived. As I pulled back the sheets to get into bed, a scattering of small, jagged pieces caught my eye. They were remnants of latex gloves, deliberately cut and placed right where I would unknowingly encounter them. My heart raced as I realized the intent behind this seemingly minor detail. With a severe latex allergy, even brief contact could send me into anaphylactic shock. Connor watched in horror as I recoiled from the bed, explaining what I had found. The implications were chillingly clear to both of us now. Someone was going to extreme lengths to harm me, to drive me away, or worse. With this latest incident, my lingering doubts evaporated. It was no accident. It was a calculated attempt on my well-being. In the days that followed, my sense of security shattered. Despite Connor's attempts to reassure me, the betrayal felt deeply personal and painfully intentional. Driven by a need to protect myself and uncover the truth, I started to investigate discreetly. I needed evidence, something concrete to help me understand not just the how, but the why. My search led me to some unsettling discoveries. Digging through emails and financial statements under the pretense of organizing family accounts, I found correspondences between Diane and a prominent family known for their wealth and influence. The emails were careful, coded in pleasantries, but the underlying message was clear. They were arranging a marriage for Connor, one that would significantly benefit the family's business interests. The reality that Diane had orchestrated these attacks to remove me from the picture, seeing me not as her son's wife, but as an obstacle to a more lucrative alliance, was devastating. She had planned everything meticulously, from the birthday cake incident to the latex gloves under our sheets. Each event was designed to weaken my position in the family, to make me leave on my own, or worse, to cause harm severe enough to remove me permanently from Connor's life. With this knowledge, I knew I had to confront the situation head-on. I needed to expose Diane's schemes, not only to protect myself, but to reveal the depth of deceit within the family. It was a daunting task, one that would alter the fabric of our family relationships forever. Yet, there was no turning back. The next step was to bring this evidence to Connor, to show him the true colors of the family he trusted, and to decide together how to confront this dark web of manipulation and betrayal. With the evidence meticulously compiled, I steeled myself for the confrontation that would undoubtedly change the course of our lives. It was scheduled to occur at a so-called family dinner, organized under the guise of introducing us to a new business partner family. Ironically, the wealthy family whose daughter was being considered as a more suitable match for Connor was also invited. The tension was palpable as we all gathered around the opulent dining table, silverware gleaming under the chandelier's light, the air thick with unspoken agendas. As the dinner progressed with polite chatter, I felt a growing sense of urgency. Finally, seizing a moment of silence, I cleared my throat and stood, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice steady. "There's something important I need to discuss. It concerns the safety and honesty within this family," I began, my eyes locking on Diane's, who stared back, her expression a mask of practiced serenity. I proceeded to lay out the evidence. I presented the email exchanges between Diane and the other family, hinting at marriage arrangements that were clearly meant to replace me. I showed pictures of the sabotaged birthday cake, the medical report from my allergic reaction, and finally, the latex pieces I had preserved in a small bag. "These were placed under our bedsheet," I declared, holding up the bag for all to see. The room fell into a stunned silence, the gravity of my accusations hanging heavily in the air. Connor, sitting beside me, looked from the evidence to his family, his expression crumpling into one of disbelief and hurt. "Mom?" Is this true? He asked, his voice cracking with betrayal. Diane and Sophie exchanged panicked glances, their earlier composure slipping as they faced the irrefutable proof of their deceit. Diane attempted to regain control, her voice shaking as she spoke. This is a misunderstanding, Connor. We were only thinking of the family's future. It's not a misunderstanding, I interrupted, my voice firm. It was a calculated attempt to harm me, to remove me from this family. How can you justify endangering my life for financial gain? Sophie, caught in the fallout, tried to inject her own defense, stuttering about the pressure from her mother and the expectations of maintaining family status. But her words fell flat, her justifications sounding feeble and hollow against the stark reality of the evidence. The guests, previously silent, now looked on with a mix of shock and discomfort. It was clear they had no idea about the real reason behind their invitation. The atmosphere was charged, the facade of polite society crumbling as the true dynamics of our family were laid bare. Connor stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with a scrape that echoed through the room. I can't believe this, he said, his voice a mix of anger and disappointment. How could you do this? To Ava, to us? He turned to me, his eyes apologetic. I'm so sorry, Ava. I had no idea. The dinner ended abruptly, the guests excusing themselves from what had turned into a family scandal. Diane and Sophie's attempts to deny their actions became increasingly desperate, but with each word, they only entangled themselves further. The evidence was too compelling, their motives too transparently cruel. That night marked a turning point. It shattered any illusions of familial loyalty and exposed the depths of greed and deception that had festered beneath the surface of polite smiles and genteel dinners. For Connor and me, it was the beginning of a difficult but necessary journey to sever ties and seek a life built on genuine love and respect, far away from the toxic reach of his family's machinations. The revelations of the evening hung heavy in the air as the last of the guests departed, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. Connor and I were left alone in the midst of the chaos, the debris of shattered relationships and exposed secrets surrounding us. He looked at me, the pain and resolve in his eyes equally palpable. Ava, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this happened. I can't believe they would do this to you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The decision that lay before him was monumental, but his next words came without hesitation. I choose you, Ava, he affirmed, his hand reaching for mine with a firm, protective grip. I will always choose you. We'll get through this together. His declaration was a balm to the turmoil that had gripped my heart. Connor's commitment to stand by me, to protect me against even his own family, was the support I desperately needed. In the days that followed, the weight of what had transpired settled in, and the need for action became clear. Together, Connor and I decided to take legal action against Diane and Sophie. The evidence of their malice was indisputable, and their intentions lethal. This wasn't just family discord, it was criminal behavior that had endangered my life. We met with lawyers, detailed the events, and filed charges, determined to see justice served. The legal proceedings that ensued were grueling. Diane and Sophie faced charges of conspiracy and attempted harm. The public nature of the trial drew media attention, and soon the scandal was plastered over local news outlets. The impeccable reputation that the family had so carefully curated over the years crumbled under the weight of their own deceit. High society shunned them, business partners withdrew their dealings, and friends turned their backs. The social empire Diane had built was left in ruins, a testament to the consequences of their actions. Connor's relationship with his family, particularly with his mother and sister, frayed beyond repair. The legal battles and public scrutiny were taxing, but Connor stood unwaveringly by my side, his presence a constant reassurance amid the storm. His decision to cut ties with his family was painful, yet necessary. He could not reconcile their actions with the values he held dear. As the legal dust settled and Diane and Sophie faced the repercussions of their actions, Connor and I began the slow process of rebuilding our lives. The ordeal had left scars, no doubt, but it also strengthened our bond. We moved away from the city, seeking a fresh start in a new community where the shadows of the past could not reach. Our commitment to each other was fortified by the trials we had endured, a testament to our resilience and the enduring power of chosen family over blood ties. In the quietude of our new life, away from the chaos and deception, we found peace. Yet, the echoes of the betrayal sometimes whispered in quiet moments, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the strength required to rebuild it. Connor and I, bound by our journey through adversity, looked to the future with cautious optimism, our hearts healing, our spirits slowly mending from the wounds inflicted by those we had once called family. As we settled into our new life in a quiet town far from the glaring scrutiny and painful memories of our past, I found myself grappling with the aftershocks of what we had endured. Connor, ever my pillar, tried to forge a path forward for us with love and patience. Yet, despite the physical distance from his family and the reassurance of their legal reckoning, the scars remained. Nightmares haunted my sleep on many nights. Casual glances from strangers stirred a paranoia that hadn't been there before. I struggled to build new friendships, my trust in people irreparably shaken. Connor and I clung to each other in this isolated world we had created, yet I could feel the strain on our relationship. The ordeal had changed me, deepening our love in some ways, but implanting a persistent fear and anxiety that I couldn't always hide. Our future, once envisioned with unbridled optimism, now seemed shadowed by these lingering doubts. Meanwhile, back in the city we had left behind, Diane, Sophie, and their family faced a starkly different reality. The scandal had ravaged their social standing and financial stability. Diane, once a revered matriarch in high society, found herself ostracized by those she had considered peers. Invitations dried up, her phone stopped ringing, and the charitable boards she had sat on discreetly asked her to resign. The shame of the trial and the public nature of her crimes against her own daughter-in-law left her bitter and isolated. Sophie, similarly affected, found her social circles shrinking dramatically. Friends she had partied with, who had once flocked to the family's lavish gatherings, now crossed the street to avoid her. The weight of public disgrace hung heavily on her, a constant reminder of the consequences of her actions. Richard, though less implicated in the direct actions, suffered guilt by association. His attempts to salvage the family's business interests were met with skepticism and distrust. Partnerships that had been the cornerstone of their financial empire were reevaluated, and many were severed, leaving him struggling to keep the remnants of their wealth intact. The luxurious lifestyle they had taken for granted was now pared down to the essentials as they faced ongoing legal fees and lost income. As the months turned to years, the once powerful family found themselves leading a life of quiet desperation. Diane's days were spent in somber reflection, her schemes and manipulations having cost her everything she held dear: her reputation, her social life, and most painfully, the respect of her son. Sophie, grappling with the reality of her role in the family's downfall, struggled with feelings of remorse and the hard task of self-reform. They were bound together not by the warm ties of family, but by the shared wreckage of their actions, each day a reminder of the past they could never fully escape. In our own quiet town, Connor and I worked to build a new life, one cautious step at a time. While the shadows of betrayal might never completely disappear, our journey together continued, marked by an understanding of our vulnerabilities and a commitment to face them together. Our love, tested and tempered by the fires of deceit, held a deeper, more enduring strength. But the question remained, lingering in the quiet moments of reflection. Could a future ever be fully freed from the scars of the past?